Tom, your reaction to this, the media pushing back on this, but didn't Biden already declare a terror emergency? More than 1,950 terror suspects alone caught crossing under Biden. That's just a generation after 9/11.
Well, the Biden administration hasn't done enough. If you look at the removal of criminal aliens, those illegal in the United States who have been convicted of a crime, those removals are down 74% from the Trump administration. So there hasn't been enough focus on criminal aliens, specifically these alien gangs like Tren-Durago and MS-13, but President Trump has promised that public safety threats and national security threats are their priority right out of the gate. So we're going to be looking at Tren-Durago. Their days of horror are coming to an end.
Talk to us about, we've seen numbers, 800,000 criminal illegal aliens crossing over the last 40 years through Biden. The National Guard already has been deployed under the Biden White House, but there's pushback against the Trump wanting to use military assets to deport illegal aliens. How does that work when you catch a criminal illegal alien to deportment? Can you walk us through how it works?
Well, first of all, DOD's helped several administrations to secure the border, Republican, Democrat. DOD will be used, if we have an agreement from DOD, the president has to make that decision. But if we use DOD, then they'll be used to do non-enforcement duties, such as transportation, whether it's on ground or air, infrastructure building, intelligence. Things that would take a badge and gun and ICE officer that are doing these type of duties, takes them away from those duties, put them on the street, and let the military do those duties, because it doesn't require immigration authority. So there'll be a force multiplier to take more agents, put them on the streets where we need them. But look, we arrest a criminal alien, we take them into custody. They're put in detention, they're put in an ice bed while we make arrangements to the home country. They got to send us travel documents. They got to accept them as a national of their country. It takes several days, up to 2 weeks. So we detain them, put them on the next airplane out, and send them out. And we're hoping DOD will help us with air flights, because there's a limited number of planes ICE has contracts with. So DOD can certainly help with air flights all across the globe.
Tom, talk to us about how no other country in the world has had its border abused by illegal aliens like the United States.
Absolutely not. We are in a world that I never thought we'd be in, Liz. Border Patrol has arrested, since Joe Biden's been in the White House, they have arrested people from 181 different countries. That's almost every country in the world. And 46,000 Chinese nationals of males of military age. There's no way 46,000 Chinese did not leave China without the coordination and consent of the Chinese government. It just doesn't happen. So we got a lot of national security threats in this nation that we got to find. We got to get them out of here quickly.
Joining me now, Tom Homan. The man tapped as Trump's borders are. He's going to oversee the enforcement of the border, the deportation of millions of migrants who game the system, many of them criminals, who are allowed in under fraudulent circumstances. Thank you for joining us. This testimony, it was so hard to watch. I forced myself to watch it because we all, as Americans, need to watch this. Your reaction to what you just heard?
You know, Laura, a lot of people ask me why I get so emotional when I do Fox News, and why I scream at members of Congress. Because I've seen so much tragedy. I talked to hundreds of angels and moms and dads who buried their children because they're killed by illegal alien. This is the latest. And I've talked to little girls as young as 9 years old that were raped multiple times by members of cartel. When you look in her eyes and everything innocent and pure has been ripped from her soul, and her life will never be the same. I mean, it's just, I'm tired of it. And the government failed the Lake and Riley family. Not only, if President Trump was president, he'd be sitting in Mexico in the Remain in Mexico program. And if he did get to New York and he was arrested for injury to a child in New York, ICE would be able to arrest him, because the priorities under Trump were, if you're in the country illegally, you're a target. But because Secretary Mayorkas put the priorities so low, even the injury to the child didn't meet the standards, so ICE could even place a detainer on him. So this is purely, it could have been prevented. This young lady's dead. And I want every mayor, every governor of a sanctuary jurisdiction to listen to that tape, listen to this young girl fight for her life, fight for her breath, trying to survive, terrified. Think of I want you to understand what she went through. Like the 9-year-old boy, that 5-year-old boy in the back of the tractor trailer that I held, I found him dead, that baked to death. I thought about what the last hour of his life was like. You need to listen to this tape. And those governors and mayors are saying they're going to stop Tom Homan, they're going to stop President Trump, shame on you. Your responsibility is protect your communities, and that's what we want to do, is protect your community.
Well, Tom, we have the Boston mayor saying she's not going to help. We have other sanctuary city mayors and other leaders, governors, saying they're not going to take part in this mass deportation. But we know American citizens overwhelmingly support deporting people from this country. Take us through how it will work, what lists you will cross-reference to try to find the people that are here, and how will this play out?
First of all, so those people who say they're going to stop us from what they're doing, they will not. I'm going to do this job. Men and women of ICE are going to do this job. You're not going to stop us. But let me give you a word of advice. If you impede us, there's going to be consequences. You cannot help us, but also read Title 8, United States Code 1324 III. It is a felony to harbor and conceal, knowingly harbor and conceal an illegal alien. So read that statute and don't cross that line. But look, President Trump has made it clear. Coming around the gate is public safety threats and national security threats, and we have plenty of them to find. Under the Biden administration, removal of criminal aliens has decreased 74%. So we got a target-rich environment. So we're going to prioritize those public safety threats. And for any governor or mayor who doesn't want public safety threats taken out of their communities, you should resign your office, because your number one responsibility is protect those communities. We have ways of finding people. I'm not going to explain it here on national TV because it's law enforcement sensitive, no. But we will find many of these folks. They will be arrested, they'll be detained, and they'll be removed. And so, because what these facilities do, and get back on sanctuary cities, they don't want us in the jails, which means we got to go to the community and find them. So these sanctuary cities are putting officers at risk rather than the safety and security of a jail. We can take them into custody easily. Now we got to send a team to the street to arrest them on his turf. We have access to who knows what weapons. It puts the officer at great risk. It puts the alien at great risk. It puts the community at great risk, and they're going to force our hand on this. So I'm going to pray every night that men and women of ICE go home to their families every night after taking the bad guys off the street.
No, I think Joe and Kamala gave a rip about what was going to happen to the poor members of ICE who have to actually carry out their duties. I don't think they care. I mean, I'm sorry. They don't act like they care. They don't call the victims of these horrible illegal alien monsters who brutalize children and young girls. They don't care about calling them. Not anything. I want to get back to how you move these people out of the country and how you detain them before they're removed, Tom, because I know Texas has offered 1,500 acres for basically a super detention facility to house people as they're processed out. Do you imagine you will utilize that area for this type of operation?
We absolutely will. When we find somebody, it's a targeted enforcement operation. When they get arrested, they'll be detained. They have to be detained for a short while we get travel documents from their host country has to agree that, yeah, they're our national. We get travel documents. We get flight arrangements, flight agreements. So we're going to detain them for a little while. Sanctuary states said they're not allowing any detention facilities in their state. Fine. Then we'll arrest them. We'll fly them out of the state and detain them outside the state, away from their families and their attorneys. That's what you want. That's what you get. You're not going to stop us doing what we're going to do. So we'll move them to a state where we can detain them. There's plenty of sheriffs across this country who are willing to give us empty beds. They want the funding, and we can put them in a jail all across the country. We'll have no problem finding a place to detain these people. It's going to cost money, so we got to have the money to do it. But President Trump's going to do everything he can to make sure we have the funds to do this. So they will be arrested, detained, put in an airplane, and go home.
But, Tom, there are a lot more people than that, right? There are millions and millions of people who are here under fraudulent circumstances. They didn't really qualify for asylum, but they're here. And they're going to be emotional videos. You know what it's going to be. Tom Homan's mean. Here's a mother and her child, and you're shipping them back or you're separated. That is, I just know that's coming. They're going to rely on that to try to shut this down. Think they can pressure you to shut this down?
No, they're going to pressure Tom Homan to shut it down. You can write all the negative stories you want of me. I don't care. Because here's the issue. You can't send millions of people to the border, demand the right to see a judge, demand the right to make a fraudulent asylum claim. Okay, we'll give you due process at great taxpayer expense. But at the end of that due process, the federal judge orders you removed. You're going to be removed. Because what is the option? If we don't remove them, then shut down the immigration court, because the court order doesn't mean anything anymore. So shut down the immigration court, take the border patrol off the border, because there's no consequences violating our law. You can't demand due process, not accept the final decision of the courts. And if you don't do that, we'll never solve the southwest border or the northern border crisis, because then you send a message to the whole world. You can enter the country legally, which is a crime. You can see a judge get ordered removed, and we're not going to remove you. You're never going to fix it. Never going to fix it.
Tom, we're just learning that there's another caravan that's been growing. It's now at 1,500 migrants, and it's rushing to the border, trying to get there, obviously, before Inauguration Day. Your message to them tonight and to the Biden administration that I imagine will, perhaps wave a lot of these people in.
I think President Trump needs to make a phone call down there and tell them they're going to stop that caravan, and they're going to have consequences like he did before. And if you want to spend every bit of your money, you want to sell your house and your savings and give it to the criminal cartels that come to America, understand this. You're not going to be staying. You're going to be leaving. We're going to make sure of that. Look, I've talked about prioritization of public safety threats and national security threats, but if you're in the country illegally, you're not off the table. We're just going to prioritize a smart way, take the worst first that pose the most danger to this community. If you're in the country illegally, you got a problem. You enter the country illegally, which is a crime, and you're going to be held accountable.
Maybe to go back on your own. Go back on your own recognizance first. Self-deport. Maybe you'll have a chance someday of coming back into the country. Tom, this is going to be a huge undertaking, and we're so glad that you are the one doing it. Thank you very much.
Tom Homan, thank you for your service to America. You fought long and hard. Appreciate you so much, Tom. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Tonight, hundreds of miles south of the border in Mexico, a caravan of migrants chanting, "We are not criminals," is rushing to make it to the U.S.-Mexico border before the Trump administration is sworn in.
So a massive group of asylum seekers just started moving north through Mexico on their way to the U.S. border. And as this is happening, officials warn our northern border with Canada may also see increased crossings in the weeks leading up to President Trump's inauguration, at which point he's promised to start the largest U.S. deportation effort ever seen, which New York, America's largest sanctuary city, has vowed to resist. But this resistance isn't going to improve the immigration situation in this country at all. In fact, it might just end up aiding criminals who don't care one bit about the American dream.
So this is Mexico right here. This is where the wall ends. You can see the boundary here. We just saw a guy literally clear these railroad tracks and disappear.
Mass deportations and military force against the cartels are just two things that Donald Trump has promised during his campaign. And with that comes the concern that the cartels will try to use the opportunity between now and Inauguration Day to smuggle as many people as they can across the border.
Trump now vowing to deport millions of undocumented migrants, saying his plan has, quote, no price tag. He's also threatening to impose a tariff of 25% on Mexican imports.
Canada is bracing for a potential rise in border crossings as the re-election of former President Donald Trump threatens to fuel a surge in asylum seekers. And some warn that this could lead to a rise in human trafficking.
So yeah, we're probably going to see them pushing more people across and more smuggling once Trump gets in because they're not going to be able to walk across anymore.
So the cartels and gangs exploiting the U.S. border only have a few more weeks to do it before it closes for good. But even if they're able to do this successfully and they end up busing more people to sanctuary cities like New York, what nobody's talking about is that President Trump's recent victory is already reshaping the immigration landscape in this country, but not in the ways most people think. Because if President Trump does implement what he's calling the country's largest deportation effort ever, states that vote red will likely cooperate and help the federal government, while blue states with progressive leaders may not only refuse to do so, but could also double down on sanctuary city policies. And the fact that some states are going to go along with this deportation effort and others are going to resist it, that right there, that could force a new wave of migration within the United States itself. Because anyone who doesn't have legal permission to reside in the country will invariably find themselves better off in a place that doesn't care about one's immigration status. And that means relocating to a sanctuary city like New York, something the thousands of people making their way to our northern and southern borders may decide to do if they're able to enter the country before the U.S. closes down its borders completely and restarts construction of unfinished sections of the border wall. That brings us to the real reason why so many people are now working their way towards the border. This might be their last chance to enter the country, and many of them are fleeing poverty. But if they enter the country outside of an official port of entry, current Biden-Harris immigration policy deems them ineligible for asylum. And as you're about to see, their best option is going to be to head to a sanctuary city like this one, where local progressive activists have vowed to fight President Trump's new plans even before he gets in. So here we are at the bus terminal, and the cheapest way to get here is to take a bus, and you can get a bus from the northern border or the southern border. And if there's a surge in border crossings, there could also be a surge in activity here as more buses arrive, bringing people to New York, America's largest sanctuary city, where people can still get a place to stay, even if they're not eligible to seek asylum.
Mass deportations and military force against the cartels are just two things that Donald Trump has promised during his campaign. And with that comes the concern that the cartels will try to use the opportunity between now and Inauguration Day to smuggle as many people as they can across.
So it's important to understand that this latest group, it's one of many that have recently started making the journey up north through Mexico towards the U.S. southern border. And this isn't a group of people trudging through the desert on foot by themselves. They're not alone. In fact, what we're witnessing here is a humanitarian relocation effort, which is completely controlled by gangs, some of which operate in New York City and exploit these very same people after they get here. And the families and individuals that make this journey are essentially being held hostage by these cartels until it's over. Now, it's true that the journey through Mexico to the U.S. border is extremely dangerous and treacherous, and yes, many of these folks need help navigating it. But the problem is, the people that are offering to help them, they just want to help themselves, and their goal is to exploit each person in their care to the maximum. If you find yourself in a strange place where things are dangerous and the only people who can help you are even more dangerous than the terrain you're walking over, you're gonna have no choice but to go with them. And because the folks traveling with the cartel cannot escape from them, they're essentially prisoners, and if they can't pay their debts, they end up working them off when they get to their final destination. And what's scary about that is when people come to New York and they want to check into one of our shelters because we offer it to everybody, they have to go to this place called the Roosevelt Hotel. It's the welcome center for every single new arrival, but there are gang members living in that place, and these gang members, they coordinate with smugglers, which means there's really no escape for somebody who thinks that they got here and because there's nobody getting off the bus behind them that's part of a gang that they're free. Nope, that's not the case. And the shocking footage you're about to see will perfectly explain why cartels are taking this opportunity now to get people across the border before it closes for good.
We are literally standing on the border with Mexico. So this is Mexico right here. This is where the wall ends. You can see the boundary here. The wall just ends. These people are running across. We just saw a guy literally clear these railroad tracks and disappear off into that community over there, which is Sunland Park. Now, when we come back around...
Did you see that? The border is essentially wide open. There's more security here at the bus terminal than there is at the southern border because that fence is locked. And people are just walking across the border. Literally, you can see houses on both sides of the border. That's crazy. It's that close. And the reporter is not only standing in the exact location where the border wall ends, she's also nearby a little house, which is called a stash house. This is where these gangsters hide out with their customers until the coast is clear, and then they simply walk across the border. And after they get across, they move between various locations until they can get people on a transportation medium to the city of their choice. And even though the border has been like this for quite some time, after getting inside the country, people had a lot more options for where they could travel to. But with Trump's deportation efforts going to start almost immediately as soon as he's inaugurated, the final destinations of many of these individuals will be severely limited, and they're going to have to make their way to jurisdictions or cities where those deportation efforts will be hindered, because if they're caught and they're not able to apply for asylum, they may have to leave the country. But if that happens, it could actually create a very dangerous situation for the over 200,000 asylum seekers that are already in New York, because what New York's sanctuary city status is going to mean is that there are really only a few places left in the country where people can go, and if a lot of those people have ties to dangerous criminal organizations, that means the criminals are coming too. And frighteningly, one of the gangs that set up shop here in New York, this Tren de Aragua gang, it was started in a Venezuelan prison, and their specialty is human exploitation. And people like that, they don't care if you owe a debt to a cartel or a gang for bringing you across the border. They're sizing you up from the moment you get here because they're inside these shelters that we have with weapons, and police aren't. This is a sanctuary city. Police cannot go into our shelters to keep people safe. And if we've got more people like that in our city, the asylum seekers that are here and thought that they had finally fled poverty and oppression are just going to find it again.
We were there as law enforcement were searching a home. These people were in a stash house. So there was 9 individuals from Mexico in a detached garage in the back. Now, this detached garage couldn't have been bigger than a one-car garage. 9 people were in there. 3.
So these gangs, they are not playing around. They are part of a well-oiled machine, and they've got infrastructure that they use to commit crime all over the place. And these operations are much more sophisticated than anyone running a sanctuary city has ever imagined. This article here talks about how when these gangs are transporting people, they take their pictures. They stamp them with an invisible ink that shows up under UV. They know exactly who their quote-unquote customers are, and they know what they look like. That's terrifying. They're tracking families and kids, and then when they come to New York and it's a sanctuary city, there's no escape for them. The gangs have them from start to finish, and then when they're here. Now, obviously, this criminal activity is only happening because a business opportunity exists along our border. But as you're about to see, even if President Trump does completely shut down our border, the levels of exploitation and gang infiltration of sanctuary cities are so high that these gangs may continue taking advantage of people long after the border itself is shut down, making sanctuary cities like New York not places that preserve and keep immigrants safe. No, these are places that put immigrants in danger. So this massive building behind me that you can kind of see here takes up half the block. It's the Row Hotel. It used to be operated as a luxury hotel, but now it's an emergency shelter for asylum seekers. It's huge. It's got over 1,300 rooms, and it's mainly designed for families. It's right here in Midtown, which might sound great, but once you realize that some of the people living inside of it aren't that great, you'll realize that people checking into shelters like this could be in danger. Here we've got an interview with an asylum seeker who lives in a city-run shelter. Now, he doesn't live in a facility that's got gang members in it, but he has a friend who does. And he's being interviewed in Midtown near the Row Hotel's sister shelter, the Roosevelt Hotel, which also has 1,000 rooms and just so happens to be a shelter where gang members definitely live. They've been caught, arrested, and they've said that this is their address. And lo and behold, they just so happen to be Tren de Aragua members. And remember, their specialty is human exploitation, something that they can easily do from the Welcome Center for all new arrivals, which that facility is, and it's a facility that houses women and children. This is a terrible situation. And when you realize that these shelters cost billions of dollars to operate, it's pretty sad to find out that they're really only benefiting the criminal element that shouldn't even be in them to begin with, but which is allowed to stay here because this is a sanctuary city that doesn't do background checks before placing wanted fugitives potentially down the hall from families that have little kids in elementary school. And as you'll notice, there's a police car out here in front of the Row Hotel, but this is as close as it can get. Police are banned from going inside. They're not allowed to go in there and get the bad guys. That means no foot patrols, no checkpoints, no knocking on doors, no patrolling the hallways, none of that. And if gang members do end up setting up shop in a place like this, oftentimes they smuggle weapons inside DoorDash delivery bags right past security because those don't apparently get scanned by metal detectors. And what that means is the criminal element inside of a facility, once it takes it over, is the only source of law and order and moral values. A terrible situation for people who need help and are looking for a better life. All because in New York we operate under the misguided idea that police are somehow bad for people that have just come to this country. You know, this situation is such a mess that everyone is starting to come around to the idea that without some sort of deportation effort, these gangs are never going to leave parts of America, especially sanctuary cities. And that's why so many people in immigrant communities, even in New York, voted red for the first time this past election. And the political class of this country that continues to vote overwhelmingly in favor of policies that hurt those who are vulnerable don't understand why this happened. But it's becoming obvious that laws that protect criminals will be used and taken advantage of by those criminals, even if they weren't designed for that purpose. And here we are in the middle of New York City learning about how this is happening from a Venezuelan asylum seeker, somebody who should be benefiting from our right to shelter rules and our sanctuary city rules, but is instead in danger because of them. And they don't understand why the U.S. isn't doing proper vetting of some of the people who come into this country. And it's probably very strange to them why back background checks aren't done before people are moved into a shelter? What if they're dangerous? What if they have a track record of hurting others? How is their presence in that shelter going to help anybody? It's not. If someone's moved into one of these shelters who is a gang member now, all of the law-abiding people who are living next to them are now in danger because this person's job is to figure out how they can put the human beings around them to work for purposes that serve their gang. And now experts are saying that the presence of criminals in our country may increase over the next few weeks before President Trump starts his second term.
So, Elizabeth, the cartel's a $13 billion a year industry. Back in 2018, it was $500 million. So, yeah, we're probably going to see them pushing more people across and more smuggling once Trump gets in because they're not going to be able to walk across anymore.
So exploiting the U.S. border, that's a $1 billion business. And you can bet that if that business opportunity is going to be closed in just a couple of months, law enforcement all over the place is going to have their work cut out for them. And that's incredibly frightening when you realize that people now are being told, hey, this is your last chance to get into the country. You better come right now. And these are families with little kids who are going to be in such danger. Not to mention dangerous individuals who fear nothing and are willing to combat law enforcement puts all of our police in danger, as well as our Border Patrol officers and our Texas National Guard. Nobody wants to see any of these people get hurt, yet that possibility sadly still exists. Which makes you wonder, if the border were closed and sanctuary cities like New York did not exist, would lives be spared? Would less people be in danger? The answer to that is sadly obvious. And literally none of this is helping the folks who get ensnared by it. They're being robbed for everything they've got by these gangs and cartels on their way here through the border and all of these stash houses, as they're called. And then when they get here to New York, these same criminals are waiting for them to continue exploiting them. If they can get a job, oftentimes it's like an Uber Eats or a delivery job because the local economy here is highly specialized and internet connected. And a lot of people that come here, the city hasn't been able to connect them with jobs, and they're going jobless and homeless once their shelter stays expire. It's very sad. And once someone's jobless and homeless in this city, that makes them even more of a target for exploitation because they've got nowhere else to turn. When criminals come knocking on the door of one's tent and say, hey, come with us, we'll get you out of here, what are some people gonna say? Not everyone's gonna say no to that. If they even have a choice, revealing that sanctuary city policies make these cities some of the worst possible places anyone who's new in America could possibly go. What do you think about that? Are sanctuary cities really benefiting immigrants, or are they benefiting a growing criminal underworld of people who really shouldn't be in the country to begin with?